Shaping Strategy, the APR Journey, is Season 2 of the INSPIR podcast, produced by the National School Public Relations Association in partnership with INSPIR's Accreditation Committee. Released during APR Month in 2026, this limited series explores every stage of the APR journey, from what to consider before starting to how accreditation shapes professional practice and what it reveals about growth, strategy, and the profession. I'm your host, Christina Baumgartner, APR. On today's episode, The APR Effect, we will speak to two APRs about how earning the accreditation can help you learn the universal language of public relations and become a more strategic practitioner. Leslie Bruinton inspires others through her leadership in school communications. She is an accredited in public relations practitioner with nearly 20 years of professional experience. The former television journalist now serves as president and CEO of School Spirit PR, a strategic communication firm supporting superintendents and school districts. Leslie is a past president of the National School Public Relations Association and a two-time past president of the Alabama School Public Relations Association. She is a 2020 AASA Women in School Leadership Award winner and a three-time INSPIR Gold Medallion winner. Additionally, she was named a 2025 INSPIR President's Award winner, the highest individual honor awarded by the association. A hallmark of her work is the understanding that the strategic use of communication and creativity can assist in solving organizational challenges. Dirk Tedman, APR, is an accomplished marketing and communications professional with a track record of success. As the Executive Director of Marketing and Communications for Eden Prairie Schools, he leads a team focused on effective and equitable engagement with its community. He is an expert storyteller and strategic thinker, which led to him being named the inaugural National School Communicator of the Year in 2024. In his two most recent roles, Dirk successfully secured more than $1 million in additional funding for marketing and communications efforts. These investments resulted from clear articulation of a vision and exceptional demonstration of capabilities. His team's work has been honored with 2 INSPIR Gold Medallion Awards, 2 Golden Achievement Awards, and numerous publications and digital excellence awards. Let's talk to Leslie and Dirk. Hi, Leslie and Dirk. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's good to be here.
I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
I think that the topic we're going to talk about today is something that is so important when we talk about the APR, and that is helping to create this shared language for people who work in the industry. And I thought we could start by talking about what that actually means. You know, when we say that there's a shared language among PR professionals, what do we mean by that?
I think we're talking about how people understand the work that we do, the way that we go about doing it, and how it gets measured. And when we have that kind of common language, we can all collectively understand what a win is. For me, when I'm interacting with people that maybe don't have that shared language, the metrics that they're citing as a win to me are just a little bit off target. So if you imagine a target and you've got the center bullseye, it's just a little bit off to the quadrant. And sometimes I wonder, why are you measuring the thing you just told me about when it doesn't impact the problem statement that you initially articulated? So for me, it challenges me to write really good objectives that connect to the problem at hand. And ensures and keeps me honest in ensuring the work that I'm doing is going to support those objectives.
I agree 100% with Leslie. And throughout this, that's probably what I'll just come in and say each time is, yeah, Leslie, got it. We can move on. But
don't do that. You're going first next time.
What I would add is, we've actually done trainings around the strategic communications process, RFI research, planning, implementation, evaluation with our school board, with district leaders, with our PTOs. And what I love is when we talk about a shared language, now when I say you are describing something that sounds like a tactic, they know what I mean. And everybody, as we know in school PR, wants to start with the tactics. We need a flyer, we need a video. Like, they don't get it, that problem statement that Leslie was talking about. And I think that having this shared language, now I'm able to go back to them and be like, that's a really great tactical idea you're having. What is the problem we're trying to solve? What are the measurable changes we want to see in order to get there? And then what are the strategies we're going to use that that tactic might fall under? And then we can see if that tactic is actually warranted. And I think that shared vocabulary just opens up conversation in a way that doesn't feel contentious. Because often it's like, that's not a good idea, or like, that's not what we should do. We don't even have to go there because we're saying we're not even like in the right area of the bullseye, as Leslie was describing. We are talking about something that is 4 steps down the road. Let's go back to the first step. And then you don't get into a fight about, is it a flyer? Is it a video? Anything else? Because your conversation is around the part that really matters.
How does having that shared language, whether you're talking to, if you work with a team of PR people or if you're talking to other leaders and administrators within your district, how does having that basis in the APR and that shared language change your confidence when you're in the room talking about what strategy you should use and what direction you should go in with the communications plan? Dirk, I'm going to start with you on this one.
This is so unfair. I struggle with confidence. I think many of us do, that imposter syndrome and so many things that are at play in the background there. And for me, I feel like what the APR allows me to do is demonstrate a level of expertise that people know I have skill in what I do. I was in a meeting last night of our Foundation for Eden Prairie Schools, which I'm an ad hoc member of. And one of the people on that board, who is also a former school board director, was talking about developing a marketing plan for the foundation. And he acknowledged, like, this is not my area of expertise and it requires real skill. And I feel like that sort of statement only came about because he has seen and heard repeatedly the process that we go through, understands that it is research based, that there is a way to tackle these problems that is methodical and impactful and can be applied on each situation. And those things are what really strengthen my confidence, is when I hear things repeated back that we've shared and know that it's making an impact. I feel like it helps me show up in spaces as somebody who can be an expert, that it's not a soft skill we're talking about, that there are actual things we are changing, behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, opinions, because of the strategic work that we're doing.
I love how you said that. And especially calling to the front that one of your school board members said that. A lot of times, what I see is that folks in the community decide to run for the local board of education, and one of the things they claim they're going to improve is communication. And if only it were so easy that being a school board member or a superintendent that's coming in that puts in their 100-day plan, I'm going to improve communication. Typically speaking, the magic wand they all bring with them is a tactic. I'm going to post repeatedly on this Facebook page. I'm going to send out a newsletter. I'm going to do a podcast. And then as time goes on and things get busier, or the weather, gets darker or lighter and we're doing more things outside, those tactics that they've come in the door implementing, saying that this is going to be thing that solves communication problem, they wane. And so we start looking at these Facebook posts that get orphaned, and the amount of time between post to post or podcast to podcast lengthens. Communication is an ongoing process. We are constantly sending and receiving information. For people that have studied the communication theories, you'll understand that analogy. But one of the beautiful things I think about communication is that there's art and a science to it. And the art is the pretty part. It's the party, it's the Facebook flyer, it's the post, it's, all of those things that people see and want to sprinkle a magic wand across it because it's beautiful and fun. But the science is where the magic happens. And that's kind of the nerdy part. And for people that have ever worked with me, you'll know that that's where I'm going to wonk out. Because as we talk about the 4-step process, research, planning, implementation, and evaluation, What happens with this magic wand approach is in the implementation phase, that's where we want to be. People want to brainstorm and implement and implement and implement and implement. So it's not our pie, it's just I and I and I and I. The difference for me is that I spend a lot of time in the research phase, and then I spend a lot of time in the planning phase. So my implementation phase is small and it's tight because I've selected tactics they're going to address the needs of the problem. Whereas what will happen when you're not working with people that have adopted a strategic communication mindset is they just want to brainstorm and make things. And that's not as much fun for me.
I think that's so true that usually when people come into the room to talk about communications, it's right away to that, well, this is what I want the flyer to look like, and this is the information that needs to be on that. I once had somebody come back from a conference and walk into my office and say, I want to start twittering. And they said it just like that. I'm going to start twittering. And so I think that is exactly what people jump to. And I'm curious if you can both maybe share a moment where you saw how the AP going through the APR process kind of made somebody have that aha moment that we can't live in the implementation and that we have to really focus in on the entirety of the communications process. And Leslie, we'll start with you this time.
I think as a professional, I want to have autonomy of the work that I'm putting out. So it can be a challenge. Back when I was working in a school system, I had a superintendent that attended a conference and went around to the table where you pick up all the good ideas, which were like flyers and brochures. The superintendent brought it back and said, "Here, do this thing." It wasn't fun for me professionally to, lift someone's idea and change the colors and fonts and make it for our district. And I don't think that it addressed that immediate need. So as I became more proficient with how to do strategic communication and getting my APR, what I noticed immediately, and Dirk alluded to this, is that I innately started teaching my colleagues how to think about that. So when I talk about the four-step process, when I'm talking to educators, I liken it to the very same process that teachers use. There's a crosswalk here. So for us, it's research. For an educator, it would be a formative assessment. For us, it's planning. For them, it's lesson plans. The fun stuff comes at implementation. For them, that's instruction. And then the evaluative piece is the final piece in the four-step process for communicators. And for teachers, that would be that summative assessment. So how well did we understand what our kiddos knew at the beginning of the week? How did we prepare them? How did we instruct them? And then we test them on Friday to see if they've learned it. And if not, we spend a few extra days. So it's a cycle. And once I was able to show that crosswalk, I saw light bulbs go off in my coworkers. And the funny thing was, I actually started having people bringing me rough drafts of communications plans. So they were no longer sending me flyers to make, they were giving me a rough draft. And it was a really good rough draft. In particular, the National Board Certified teachers, those are the ones that did it. I think it became innate for them because that was their process, but it made my job so much easier. And I even had my superintendent, a different superintendent, write a very basic communications plan for me. And I was like, that's where I want to be.
I just got full body goosebumps when you walked through that. I have never heard somebody make that comparison in that way, and it's so salient. It's a really clear connection, and helps build that bridge that I think so often, the central office up on a hill, etc., that they can see, oh, they're doing similar work to us. What a powerful, powerful thing. My example here is not as powerful. And also have to hope our HR director never listens to this. But when I first started in my role in the district, he came to me with an idea, something they wanted to do around recruitment. And it was a series of videos. And I did that same sort of questioning, trying to understand what the need was. Like, this is a really, intriguing idea. What is the problem we're trying to solve, et cetera. And he got pretty frustrated in that meeting. And he was really taken aback that I was kind of questioning like what we should be doing in this area because he knows HR, he knows what works for recruitment, and like we should just help support execute on that plan. And when I went and checked in with him later, he said the reason I got so frustrated is because I realized halfway through that meeting you were right, and that we should be thinking about this more
Bravo.
holistically.
Love it. That is
Yes,
a
he was
win. That's huge.
That is
totally. And what he said was, I realized we were attacking the wrong problem. The problem isn't how our people are hearing about us, it's what message are we trying to tell them about why you want to work in Eden Prairie schools. And I was like, yes, exactly. Like now we're on to something and we can work from there because one of the ways we will do that is distributing information to people, but we have to have the clear why before we get there. And I think that was an opportunity where I was able to change something, both in that situation, but also longer term for our relationship. Because he realized that one, I would go toe to toe with him and hold my ground for the work that we do, but also because he began thinking strategically in that same way that Leslie was just describing. And now when we work on projects, it really starts with what are we trying to do, and then getting to how are we going to do it.
I love
Can I
that.
share one quick thing about what you just said? I think the fallacy of education, I think sometimes for us as communicators, is because we're on an annual calendar or cycle, it's a lot of rinse and repeat. It's time to put out the back to school message. It's time to put out the report card message. It's time to put out kindergarten registration. It's time to put out, last day of school or a weather day. And so that type of cadence doesn't allow for the folks that are doing that kind of communication to be challenged to think about, is this the best right way to go about doing it? Because we just pull out the stuff we used last year. And so when they're coming to you, they're kind of asking you to be an order taker or a short order cook. Just give me what you gave me last time. And I'm thinking, I might have something better. I need some more information.
I love that. I think that's a really great point, and it actually leads very nicely into my next question, which is when we look at ourselves as communicators, and when somebody listening to this who maybe hasn't really started learning about the RPI process yet, I think one of the great things we've seen in our industry is so many new folks coming in over the last few years, who are maybe either fresh out of school or coming from other industries, maybe haven't been exposed to the communications process at this point. Where do you see when you're talking to other communicators, because I know you've both been very active in the school PR world, where do you see the biggest gap between how people think that they're being strategic versus what the APR actually defines as being strategic?
I would say one of the gaps that I see is people don't realize that the success they saw in a campaign or an initiative that they did is repeatable. They had work happen, it went really well, and they think it was the tactical parts of that that led to it. But what they don't realize is at some level, they had done this strategic planning process. Maybe not as articulately or as thoroughly as you would do if you had your APR, but there's something innate when you really begin to try to solve a problem that leads you through exactly the process Leslie described. Okay, let's research. Who are our audiences? What is it that they need? What differentiates them? What are the existing pieces of data we already have about this problem we're trying to solve? And how can we use that and learn from it and apply it in this new context? What is going to make the most effective use of our time when we have such limited time and resources to make an impact? And how are we going to put that into action? When they do that work, it happens somewhat naturally, especially the more experienced you become. But what they don't realize is you can do that time and time and time again when you apply this process and go through the steps. And that's the reason there are steps, is because it's been battle tested. We see repeating results as through doing that over and over. And so I think that is one of the biggest gaps that I see with people is they had a really great success and they can't figure out why when they do the same thing again, it doesn't create that same success. And it's because they're applying the same tactics and not really thinking about the strategies, those measurable outcome-based objectives and the goal that they're trying to achieve. And when you center yourself in that, you'll find that these accidents, these, throwing spaghetti at the wall that's stuck actually happens more and more frequently.
I see a nuance of that. Sometimes you'll have a practitioner who is not yet grown the muscle to be a strategist, and they will look at the work of a strategist. Maybe they'll see it in an award cycle, and they say, "That's our problem. We need to do that thing." And they pick up that awards application and they treat it like a song book in the choir, and they're going to sing from it. Problem is, they did not add in their inputs, like their demographics, their budgetary constraints, their communication advantages they might have over another community. And so the argument that, it's my fault that I mentioned the words admire and acquire, and people use it all the time. And I do believe that you should admire and acquire. But at a certain point, you've got to do your own homework. And so just because you see a great idea and see it being executed well in another community, you have a different group of stakeholders and they deserve their own strategies to reach them. So I'm like admire and acquire now with a little asterisk. Do your own work.
And I love that. You should have copyrighted that phrase or trademarked that phrase when you started using it. Because
It's
if
so
I could,
ubiquitous.
it is the
Oh, my
amount
fault.
the
Oh,
amount
my
of
fault.
times that I hear that get used. Um, one of the things that I have heard from people is that maybe they don't plan on staying in school PR. And maybe there's another field that they're looking to get into, or they're not sure what's going to happen, with some of the budgetary realities that districts are facing. Are they going to be able to stay in their district? And so why pursue the APR? Because that's just an INSPRA thing. And I'm wondering if you could maybe both touch upon, is this just an INSPRA thing, or is this something that gives you language that works across every field when you're looking at public relations?
So the long and short of this is that it can benefit anyone in any field. And when you go through the process and take the test, you will see that because some of the competencies it's scoring come from other industries. The test is administered through the Universal Accrediting Board, which is kind of led up by PRSA, and there are 8 or 9 member organizations, of which INSPRA is one. And so each of those organizations are contributing competencies and scenarios for you to consider when you take on that test. So here's the interesting thing. If you've gone through the APR process, you've at least had an opportunity to consider how to handle issues and challenges in other industries. Secondly, it's a relatively small investment compared to going back to school, financial and time cost. Third, what if it's the differentiator in getting that next job? Only, I think at one point in time, the stat they were using were only 2% of public relations practitioners nationwide had it. So, what if it's your differentiator? And I say that as a person who worked in a school system. The recession hit back in 2009 and I lost my job. So, how do I present myself in a way that my portfolio, my resume allow me to stand apart? And I think that this is a way to do just that.
I agree 1,000%. It's called the Universal Accreditation Board for a reason because it's not just NSPRA. But also, I would go even one step further. The skills that you learn through this process are applicable beyond just public relations. This is a strategic planning process. And in our district right now, we're currently doing a facilities planning process and trying to imagine what are the building spaces, classrooms, playgrounds we're going to need into the future. And my superintendent tapped me to lead that facilities planning process, separate from my communications work, but to guide a group of people in developing a strategic facilities plan. And you know what? I am using those RPI skills. It is not anything special or new, and yet people are blown away after each meeting of how much we accomplished, how actionable it seems, how it connects to our overall purpose. And I'm not doing anything special. I'm following the same playbook that I got in my school PR hat, and now applying it in a new context. And I think that's true for any work you would do in the future. If you want to be impactful, if you want to be able to demonstrate results, if you want to have data that backs up what you say you can do, you should follow the APR process. And getting that accreditation certifies publicly that you are somebody who gets results. And I think that matters.
I love that they tapped you to lead this facilities planning just based on, your knowledge of the strategic planning process through earning your APR. That's incredible.
Yeah, I joke that it saved them a lot of money from hiring an external consultant, but I also think that it is a really strong recognition of not just the work I've been able to do, but our team by following that and the trust that I have from my cabinet colleagues and from the superintendent in having demonstrated we can follow a process and get outcomes from that that move the needle on where we're trying to go as a district.
And that speaks to one of the competencies that you will learn about if you pursue an APR is serving as trusted counsel. You only get that when you're able to operate at that high strategic level that allows you a seat at the table to have access to the decision makers and to be thought of in your own right as a decision maker in the district. That's something that many communications professionals would love to have is a seat at the table, but some of them, the reality is, don't even know the room where the table is. So until you can operate at that level consistently and get results for it and prove, your worth internally, it's going to be hard to have a seat at the table. And Dirk, I think what you just shared demonstrates the trust your colleagues have in your professionalism and how you can help your district achieve some of its overarching goals.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up our conversation about how the APR can impact your career, by having that shared language and the opportunities that it can open up for you. I'm curious, before we go, if you could share, if you went back to day one of your APR process, what would you tell yourself?
That was like pre-pandemic, like a long, long, long time ago.
Same.
I got one. I actually have one. This is kind of funny. So I have a younger sister who has her APR. She does communications as well, and she earned hers way before I did. And for years, I talked about, I'm going to get my APR. I'm going to get my APR. I'm going to get my APR. You get no credit for saying you're going to get your APR. Do it. And I think about like how much time I wasted vocalizing that I'm going to pursue it. I could have just done it. And so that would be what I would say.
I would say it's worth the risk. I was like many of us, I'm an overachiever. I hold myself to really high standards. I was scared about doing this and failing. I had heard people who didn't make it through the panel presentation or who failed their test, and I had so much anxiety over that. And what released it for me is I realized there's no way I can possibly gain all of the knowledge there is to gain, and I can't read and retain all 40 of these recommended texts for the test and everything. And that I had to trust myself as a leader, as a practitioner in the studying I had done. And it finally came down that I realized I'm going to take this test and I'm either going to pass or fail. There's only two outcomes. And if I fail, it's going to tell me where I need to direct my efforts more. And there was something really freeing about that of it doesn't matter because I get to take it again and then I'll know where I need to make improvements. Thankfully, I did pass and I didn't have to do that. But I wish at the beginning I wouldn't have held myself to such a high standard and would have just trusted myself a little bit more and the work that I had done in this. And I would say that to anybody that there's no perfect time where the skies are going to open up and a light is going to shine and music that plays that says now is the time for your APR. You just have to take the leap. And when you do, you will see the impacts of that in your work each day and in the trust you garner from your colleagues and the seat at the table that you earn, as Leslie was describing.
Yeah, when you actually get to the point where you achieve your APR, you haven't arrived. It's a milestone, but you have to keep going. And so the work that you put forward to get your APR, I would not show the work that I put forward to get my APR today. You know, I guess I'm 13 years past, and so I have continued to grow. My work has continued to get better. I think that some people want to make, you know, good the enemy of perfect and trying to get a project together. Just get the project together. And that APR process, whether it's the panel portion or the test portion, both are instructive to helping you grow. The path is not, you know, it's really not, even though it is pass fail, I don't want you to view it as pass fail, view it as a professional learning opportunity that over the course of the 1 year calendar countdown that you have to successfully complete, that you will grow. And that's the ultimate goal there.
That's such great perspective to bring into the conversation. And I love that because as I think about my own journey, like in the same way, I'm like, oh gosh, look at all those output objectives. Like we're just trying to check numbers off and not an outcome objective that's a change in behavior. And it really is a learning and growth process. And I appreciate the reframing of that around professional development because at its heart, that's what the APR is. And it's some of the best professional development that you can get in communications, and I would argue generally.
Great words of wisdom to close out our episode with. Dirk and Leslie, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation.
Thank you
so much for having us.
Shaping Strategy, the APR Journey, is a limited series podcast from the National School Public Relations Association, produced in partnership with INSPRA's Accreditation Committee. Be sure to visit inspra.org for more information about accreditation in public relations, membership information, professional development resources, and more.